Hello everyone. So, the IJN Tier 10 gunboat destroyer the Harugumo has been fully released. And I've been playing it a fair bit in the last few days, trying to get a feel for it, seeing if maybe it differs somehow from my earlier perspective when I was still testing the ships. As you probably know, while I was testing the ship, I did consider it a tad too strong. Perhaps not that healthy for the game overall with all its firepower, but Wargaming obviously disagreed. And now that the ship has been on the live server for a couple of days, of course, we've been able to track some of the stats. We have some early stats from the live server, being able to compare the ship to the other Tier 10 DDs. And well, the Harugumo, much like I expected, is topping the charts quite handily. And this is on all servers, EU, NA, Russia, Asia, they all have identical numbers. Now, I assume this will even out a bit more with time, as the people who unlock the ships this early, or unlock the ship this early, tend to be the grinders and the players with a lot of free XP saved up, so obviously, usually, they have a bit more experience. The ship is, however, topping almost all the charts. I mean, win rate, average damage, kill to death ratio, average frags, average XP, and so on. So it's kind of like I expected, but and if we filter it so that we look at the top 25% of players, meaning basically the top 25 of the top 25 most skilled players in each of these ships, and these are the players who are able to get a bit more power out of the ships, then you can really see the potential strength of this ship, because, well, the gap between the Harugumo and the rest becomes kind of even bigger. So once again, very much as I predicted and kind of worried about. But perhaps this will even out once again as more people get used to fighting the ship, as the slower grinders catch up and unlock it. Maybe it will balance out a bit more and we will get a better idea of how the ship performs in the average player's hands. The ship itself is obviously a pure gunboat. It relies extensively on its guns to deal damage. In terms of consistency, I consider this a good thing, because landing torps always relies on a bit of luck and RNG. Even if you can bring down the percentage by intelligent positioning and smart predictions, you're still relying on the torps. Well, the spread being good and the ship not changing course, no random planes spotting it, no hydro spotting it, so forth. There's always a bit of randomness when it comes to torps, so that's why I tend to enjoy the consistency of the guns a fair bit. Now, IJN torps are, of course, in particular, are notoriously easy to dodge, as they have pretty much the worst concealment in the game. So having some meaty guns to rely on when playing an IJN ship is a nice change and something I quite enjoy. In terms of raw gunpower, the Harugumo packs 240k HE DPM and 340k AP DPM. The AP DPM is monstrous. Like it's the highest among DDs by a vast margin. No one even gets close. Now, although some DDs like the Gearing get fairly close to the theoretical HE DPM, like Gearing has 216 compared to Harugumo's 240, that's just theoretical HE DPM. In reality, none of them are even in the same ballpark. The reason for this is the improved HE pen on these 100mm IJN guns, which allow this ship to penetrate 25mm of armor. Now, of course, you slap IFHE on this, and instead of penning 25, you are penetrating 32mm of armor, which means you are essentially penetrating the majority of armor at high tier. The Kurfürst here, he's a bit of an exception. He's got 50mm of armor, so he can actually shatter a lot of my shells. Hence, let's switch this, show off some of that AP DPM. He is a bit angled, but it's not going to stop us. But when we get to a ship like, for example, the Republic, which is very common in high tier these days, he is coated pretty much entirely in 32mm armor, and you can see just how many shatters I'm getting. The shatters I get is when I hit his belt armor. I'm literally hitting his citadel armor. Anywhere else I hit this guy, besides the turrets, and I'm getting raw damage. And he gives broadside again, and we get another chance to show off this 340k AP DPM, which I mentioned is horribly, terrifyingly strong, and you do not want to get caught in this position. They just melt. I'm getting like achievements left. This is ranked, by the way. I tested the ship in ranked. It works quite well. I'll get back to that in a bit more. I don't think the gunboat perhaps so good for ranked, which I'm running right now, the gunboat build, but overall, like, the DPM on this ship is incredibly potent and, well, the most powerful of any destroyer out there. By far, no competition. I don't think it's even comparable to anything else. The Harugumo is just an absolute DPM monster, and no one comes close. He tries to flee once again. You can see the ratio of shattered shells. Although, well, I did shoot a bit of AP in between, so we probably got a bunch of bounces in there because of that. But overall, like, the raw consistent damage you pump out, especially against Conqueror, Republic ships with 32mm armor, is insane. With 10 guns on a 3-second reload, the low fire chance of 5% isn't an issue either, because of the overwhelming shells that you're throwing at the enemy. In this example we have a Hakuryu, and you can see just how quickly I started triple fire on this guy. Not a double, but a triple fire just by shooting different sections of his ship. And this is, of course, with the gunboat build that I greatly enjoy. You end up getting a 7% fire chance with the gunboat build. You lose 1% to IFHE, but you gain 2 from Demo Expert and slotting the flags. So ultimately though, it gives you a solid 7% fire chance, which is honestly more than enough, because the sheer amount of shells that you throw out, the sheer like non-stop rainbow that you throw out is pretty much guaranteed to inevitably start fires. And of course for ships, battleships and carriers and such, it is naturally extremely frustrating to deal with. The torps are the Shimakaze Type 93 Mod 3 12km torps, which are quite easy to spot, but they hit like truck and they have a very high flooding chance. So obviously the classic ambush play, you see a battleship coming around the corner. I had 13k damage when this clip started, by the way. You see a battleship coming around the corner, you drop your incredibly powerful potent torps his way, and then you start Dakka-ing. And this combination is just, it's really terrifying. Massachusetts, of course, can't really... He can shatter a great percentage of these shells, but ultimately the sheer firepower does inevitably start permanent fires. He damage cons more fires, and then the torps suddenly show up after he's used his damage con, and he's got a permanent flooding, and he's got a fire, and I mean... that was a tier 8 battleship basically killed in 1 minute with the help of a single torpedo hit and just that raw firepower. This sort of synergy combination is something I've obviously been using a lot with this ship. You see where the enemy ships are going, you drop your torps in their way, and once it looks like you're actually gonna potentially get some juicy hits, and then you start opening up. It's of course especially powerful when you got ships who have used their damage con. For example, this guy here has used his damage con. He's full health right now, but trust me, that full health is not going to last very long, because as I mentioned, the torpedoes only need that one hit to get that flooding, and then of course the incredible fire chance of these guns. We already got a double fire on him, and at this point he's pretty much guaranteed dead. So, oh, and there's the third fire. So now he's flooding and he's got a triple fire. There's absolutely nothing left for him. So we smoke up and we already switch targets, because the sheer, like, the burst dot damage cannot be overstated. You have a perfectly healthy ship, suddenly you're bleeding health from 50 different sources. And the Ibuki, of course, the Ibuki has what, 25-30mm armor, and of course against Harugumo, he damage cons the early fire, so I could technically switch to AP because he's giving the broadside here, but I don't really need to, because, well, I already know his damage con, so I know that fire is going to keep him spotted and it's going to keep burning. And the raw damage, the raw damage of this ship is something that's so terrifying. I mean, it's supposed to be a destroyer, right? Well, that doesn't look like any destroyer firepower I've ever seen. The reason I move out of the smoke is, of course, I'm afraid of potential Ibuki torpedoes. He was giving a lot of broadside for a long time, so I figured I might as well move out. And then the next target is the Ruin. We killed the Massachusetts, we killed the Ibuki, and now we're switching to the Ruin, and this non-stop rain of destruction just continues. And there's not many destroyers that can literally just... This entire enemy team, they were pushing this flank. My teammates were running away. Look how far away my teammates were, and I had no qualms whatsoever just pushing in here, smoking up, and basically picking a fight with all of them, and they just got shredded. And that really is the power of this ship. As this rune later says, that's not normal, and I do kind of have to agree. I mean, it ain't right. I'm sorry, but it just seems so absurd for a destroyer. And of course, if you spec Adrenaline Rush, which I highly recommend on all builds, you obviously become angrier the lower HP you are, and this ship becomes very terrifying. I've had more than one destroyer jump me when I've been low HP like this. They've jumped me out of stealth and they've been thinking, haha, this is gonna be an easy kill, and then the absolutely insane DPM of the Harugumo has actually managed to end it with a trade. Instead of just me being killed, I've actually managed to take them with me, and this is not a rare occasion. People don't fully understand just how much firepower this ship has in it, and low HP Harugumo is extremely terrifying. That's of course not to say that the ship is without weaknesses. It handles like an absolute brick. No DD comes close to being as unwieldy as this one. The Kaba might be a clumsy ship, but at least it's fast. And I chose this clip here as a pretty good example of someone who doesn't really understand that this is more of a cruiser than a destroyer. This Harugumo shows himself in the open, because I guess he wanted to shoot, he wanted to deal damage, and he shows himself in the open, and this allows me to see that he is actually going to see. Now, against the other destroyers, trying to hit something with these Shimakaze torps would probably be very, very unlikely. But I now know that the Harugumo, even if he's going to fade into stealth, I know that he's trying to get into sea. And I now have torps out. And why is the Harugumo such an easy target to hit with torpedoes? Once again, that handling. Harugumo is slow. It does a measly 35.7 knots. I mean, you can enhance it with speed boost and flags, but it's still by far the slowest destroyer in the game. Now, the Daring might challenge it for its slowpoke thrown later, but that ship is still a work in progress, so we'll have to see about that one. There's more than that though. The turning circle is atrocious. It has an 830 meter turning circle. That puts you on par with the Conqueror that has an 820 meter turning circle. Most cruisers turn faster than you do. Even the Hindenburg has an 800 meter turning circle. And here we see this guy, he's slowing down to shoot and he sees my torps. Well, he manages to slow down in front of the first one, but the acceleration on this ship is also absolutely atrocious. And there is nothing he tries to accelerate out of the way, but he has no chance, and those torps I launched ages ago catches him in the broadside and he gets killed. And unlike a cruiser, there's no torpedo belt, there's no hydro, there's no health pulses to survive those hard-hitting torps. So this horrible turning circle, I mean, the Hindenburg has an 800 meter turning circle. The American cruisers and the Minotaur outturns you so easily it's not even funny. It's not even a competition. The Minotaur has a 660 meter turning circle. You have an 820 meter turning circle. The rudder shift is also less than impressive at 5.5 seconds, and you can't really slot the rudder shift module either. You have to slot the acceleration because, as you just saw, the acceleration is also complete garbage. Now you add in things like the ship's massive size. It's much bigger than all the other DDs. It's even bigger than the Khabarovsk. It dwarfs all the other DDs in size, and you realize why I sometimes, even accidentally, not even intentionally, I accidentally call it a cruiser. In terms of size and handling, it certainly fits the bill of a cruiser, and in terms of damage, it also fits one, absolutely. Obviously, this combination of very slow speed and massive size and terrible handling means that certain things are extremely strong against it. For example, carriers. With no defensive AA and a super Unicom carrier dropping you, you are almost always going to die. Your AA is nowhere near enough. This is a midway dropping me. You can see how little my AA actually does about his planes. Now, this time I actually managed to juke him by using my speed boost and stopping my ship, and his perfect cross drop that should have caught me from both sides overshoots because of my juke. But that's the kind of juke that is going to work once against the carrier, and the next time he will, no doubt, just line it up better and kill you off. So, significant weaknesses on all of these fronts. So, where exactly does all of this leave the ship? Well, the ship has a concealment of 6.2, which is actually surprisingly good. That is with the full stealth build. I will show you both builds at the end. Personally, I prefer the gunboat build for randoms, and I think the stealth build is probably better for ranked. The gunboat build has a 6.9 km concealment. Ultimately though, This ship is obviously extremely vulnerable to torpedoes. As you saw the example, you will eat torpedoes in your smokes. Inevitably, at some point, I've done it, you will do it. It's very hard to avoid. In fact, at first glance, this seems like a very easy ship to play. You smoke up and you duck, and that's the end of the story. But ultimately, having no real protection against torpedoes, no hydro, and no real warning, you need to be quite aware of enemy ship movements at all times. And if you don't have anyone to scout for you, it becomes even more challenging. Trying to play aggressive also turns surprisingly challenging because a single radar on the ship can be brutally punishing. Something like a Wooster popping up at 9.5 km with radar, and you have to turn around and flee with your 830 meter turning circle. It is extremely rough. And plane spotting, your plane detection range is well over 4 kilometers in both gun and stealth build. So your planes are gonna be a huge issue. Well, they are a huge issue. Radar is very terrifying. All sorts of torps are very terrifying. So the ship certainly does have its share of weaknesses, and even though at first glance it might seem like a very simple ship to play, well, lol, all you do is shoot, it's actually quite a bit harder than that. But ultimately, the raw firepower is the reason why I love this ship. It's a super powered cruiser in a destroyer hull. And I think it's hilariously fun to play. It's just amazingly enjoyable. I play it as a relaxation between ranked games. Is it a bit too strong? I think it might still be a bit too strong, but we'll see how the stats eventually even out. Ultimately though, this ship, I do recommend this ship. I think it's very strong and very a lot of fun to play, and it offers quite a different game style. It's kind of a mix between what I would maybe say the gearing and the Kaba, and well, maybe even a bit of Grossovo in there. There's a lot of smoking up and shooting, a lot of patient calm play, but you do have some concealment to play with, unlike the Kaba, but you also have no handling to play with, unlike the Kaba. So it's a fun ship. It gets my recommendation. I mean, I've been playing it a ton for a good reason. It's just hilarious, but the raw firepower that it has, I'm not entirely sure if this is going to last. Once again, we'll have to see how the stats even out. Anyway, that was my overview of the ship, its strengths, and what I consider its weaknesses. Let me show you guys the two builds that I have been using on the ship, both of which I can recommend. It of course depends on your style and in which game mode you intend to play. As usual, we will be starting with the modules. Now, you can unlock the F3 torpedoes, but I honestly don't recommend them. The reason to use F3 torpedoes in general for the Shimakaze is to enhance your close quarters capacity, your close quarters combat capability, and you kind of don't need that in the Harugumo. You want to be able to hit those long range torps, and in general you don't want to be pushing into situations with. I already don't really recommend F3 torps on the Shima for the simple reason that if you get caught in the radar in a Shima, you are in some serious trouble. Now imagine doing the same thing, except your ship is 50% larger, much slower, and has the turning circle of a beached whale. And now you get caught in a radar. So obviously for all these reasons, F3 torpedoes are very much not recommended for the Harugumo. It might look like an upgrade, but I consider it a massive downgrade and something I do not recommend at all. Consumable wise, absolutely go for the premium smoke. It gives you so much more capacity to just deal damage without having to worry about dodging and so forth. You have to worry about your positioning naturally so you don't get torped in the smoke. But I would go premium smoke followed by probably premium damage con if you only can, because having a broken engine on an already slow ship makes you very, very slow, even with last stand active. Followed by torpedo reload booster and finally speed boost in that order. The torpedo reload booster might seem like a very long cooldown, but having an additional one being able to launch those huge torp volleys can give you surprisingly good rewards. Upgrade wise, priority number one is of course main armaments. You want your turrets to survive and you want your torp tubes to survive. Turrets are more important naturally because if you're in knife fights you want to bring as much Dakka as possible to bear. Engine survival. Having a broken engine messes with your acceleration, which is already awful, and your speed, which is already awful. So this is something we want to mitigate as much as possible. Followed by AA guns mod. None of these others are really that useful, and if a carrier is coming your way, having that AA gun range, or just being able to shoot down fighter and spotter planes is quite useful, because even though you don't have defensive AA, your AA values, especially in the gunboat build, are quite good. And acceleration mod. I don't recommend a rudder shift mod at all, because ultimately the only thing this really cuts down is how fast your steering gears or how fast your rudder shifts from side to side. It does nothing to make it mitigate your horrible turning circle. So when you have a turning circle this bad and you already have a pretty good destroyer rudder shift, not the best but a decent, then I think the acceleration is much more important on this big clumsy ship. Concealment, I don't really rate the steering gears mod for the very same reason I don't rate running a steering gears mod here, because your turning circle is already awful. Making your rudder faster is not gonna have that big of an impact to begin with. And finally, of course, main battery. Your bread and butter is your guns, and getting 12% extra DPM is a pretty obvious upgrade in this case. I'll go over the flags now, since I'll be covering two different gunboat builds or two different boat builds in just a second. Detonation flag, obviously. Speed flag, strongly recommended. The fire chance flags are so good. It might seem like, well, I slot these two flags and I only get 1% fire chance, but when your default fire chance is 5%, 4% with IFHE, bumping it from 4 to 5 is a pretty massive upgrade in terms of fire starting capacity. So these two flags are probably, of all the ships in the game, the Harugumo probably benefits the most out of these two fire chance flags. So those are very highly recommended on the ship. Besides that, I've gone AA, mostly because the AA is such an issue at high tier in this ship, and any little help I can get I will happily take. Camo wise, I already showed you the premium camo, and well, that's entirely up to you. Wear a camo though, don't try to save money on that, that's horribly stupid. The first build I'll be showing is my gunboat build. Now, we start off with priority target, simply because, well, you end up gunboating a lot, hence the name, and knowing how many people are aiming at you is quite important. This has value on both builds though, I will get into that a bit more later. AR for that increased Dakka, and a last stand for that survivability. And now that we go full gunboat build, we go BFT for faster firing, just 10% raw DPM, plus of course the AA is always welcome. 2% higher fire chance. I said the fire flags were great on the ship. You can imagine just how good Demo Expert is when it gives a whole 2% to these rapid firing guns. IFHE, we want to buff that pen. This is actually this is a higher priority. In fact, I should go over this in priority, and that's, you go priority, last stand, BFT, IFHE, in that order. And after that, we can go AR, and then we can go AFT, and then I would probably go Demo Expert as the last 3 points. AFT naturally for that gun range, even though you might think like, well, I'm never shooting a ship that's 15 kilometers away. What you're actually often doing is you're shooting a ship that's 12 kilometers away, but he's sailing away from you. So you have to lead, you have to put your crosshair far ahead of him in order for your shells to catch up to him, and you need that increased main battery firing range in order to put your crosshair far enough ahead to be able to land those shells. So the AFT is actually a very integral part of this gunboat build, and it gives you a lot more damage, and oftentimes unnoticed damage, because, well, you look at the clip later and you're like, well, he was 12 km away when I was shooting him, but you're not taking into account that you had to put your crosshair far beyond your normal range in order to land those shells on him. So this is the gunboat build. For ranked though, well, or ranked, or in general the concealment based build, once again we go priority target first. Now I mentioned this had multiple uses, and the other use of priority target, which is so important, is that it tells you when a DD you're fighting switches to torpedoes. You might see that it specifically says the detection indicator will show the number of opponents that are currently aiming at your ships with main battery guns. Main battery guns, not torpedoes. So if you're fighting another destroyer and your priority target shows 1 or 2 or whatever, and suddenly the number goes down 1 and then goes back up, it means the DD you were fighting just switched to his torpedoes and he just launched his torps. And on a big clumsy destroyer like the Harugumo, this additional information is so incredibly valuable and so important. And if you're pushing into a cap and you get spotted by a DD because he has better concealment than you, and once again you see the priority target go 1, then disappear, and then go 1 again, you know that you're pushing into torpedoes, and it means you have to take evasive maneuvers. So priority target is bread and butter on pretty much any Harugumo build, and I will heavily disagree with anyone who claims otherwise. I think it's amazing and fits this build so well. Once again, we go AR and we go last stand, very same, but once again for the more ranked build, we focus on getting survivability expert because you want to survive. Health is important. You want to be pushing caps, you want to be contesting, you want to be fighting other DDs a lot, and you want to survive. So survivability expert is high priority on any ranked and competitive build, followed by concealment expert. We want that stealth. Once again, if we're going to be pushing, scouting, all these things, stealth is highly important, followed by IFHE. You use this on all builds regardless. It's such a power boost. There's no reason not to use it. And finally, the last 3 points into superintendent for that additional smoke. Smokes are amazing in any sort of competitive game mode because not only can it save yourself or just allow you to deal more damage from a smoke, it can also save your teammates. Your cruiser is screwed, your cruiser is being focused fired or chased, you can save him. So that's the competitive build. And I think both builds are excellent. I think the ship shines in both builds. Personally, I love the gunboat build just because I love the pure Dakka and I like playing it in random battles. But for ranked, I would probably recommend the other build more. Anyway, that was my Harugumo commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys will enjoy the ship, and I hope you guys will enjoy all that Dakka. In other news, my Discord is rapidly approaching 10,000 members. We're at 9.4k I think now. If we do hit 10k members, then I'm gonna be hosting a big giveaway on the Discord because that will be a pretty goddamn awesome milestone. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I will talk to you guys later.